I didn't see. Tim, are we on? Yep, perfect. All right, it is 5:00 p.m. on Thursday, January 20th, and I would like to call to order this regular business meeting of the Newmarket School Board. We will begin this meeting as we do all others with the Pledge of Allegiance. Lila, our student representative, if you could lead us in that, I would appreciate it very much.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, it is now 5:01, and I will open the floor to public comment. Anyone who likes to say anything, just come to the mic and introduce yourself and give your address. Oh, looks like no one's taking the bait today. All right, I will close public comment at 5:01.
Oh, wait, something's here. I do. Oh, it's children.
Are you guys here to observe, or do you want to go to the mic for public comment? All right, we'll close the public comment and begin the business meeting. The first thing on our agenda is our student representative report. Lila, I will put it to you.
Yes, thank you. A lot of interesting stuff is always happening in the junior high school. Our Interact Club and High School Democrats Club have teamed up to put on a warm clothes drive, which will be starting next week. There will be collection bins in each of the English classrooms. The National Honor Society has planned a snow sculpture contest for the community. More details to come once the forecast is a little snowier. And the Student Council just finished up a little Candy Grams event to help spread some holiday or New Year cheer throughout the school.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Of course.
The next thing on our list is the superintendent's report. I will send it to you, Dr. Gibbons.
Okay. So just a couple of quick things. Of course, Tuesday was one of our professional development, curriculum development days. And we're continuing to move forward with training and support for our new math programs. So we had a data coach come out and look at data with our teachers by grade level, both for ELA and for math. And then they took a deeper dive to evaluate strengths and areas where we need to focus more attention on, where students maybe have missed some concepts. So that helps us to be able to make some modifications and know where to focus our attention. So that took place. Also, math coaches will be working with teachers starting in February, where they'll go in and observe and then do some modeling for our teachers to help support them in developing their skills associated with our new math program. At the senior high school, and for elementary school UA personnel, they focus their attention on UBD. So they go through training sessions, and then there is time available for them to then work on developing those units and their curriculum. So each session that we have, they take kind of a little bit more time in focusing on one of the topics, and then the teachers have the opportunity to work with coaches to develop their units. So lots of work going on, and that's kind of pumps you up, when you spend so much time, not being able to focus on your own professional development, to be able to take a day and really feel like you're doing something for yourself, investment in your practice that's going to help kids improve is always something that is uplifting. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that tonight. Also, just to let you know that we've unpaused athletics. So the outbreak that caused us to pause athletics seems to, have resolved itself. And so the athletic director did send out a note to athletes and to parents of athletes to let them know we'll resume. We do have some new protocols that we feel need to be put in place, given that the Omicron surge has not quite hit New Hampshire yet, and our numbers are high here in Newmarket in particular. And so we feel like we need to ramp up some of our mitigation strategies in order to be able to try to counteract some of this surge that we're seeing. So that'll be in a little while. We'll talk more about that and the new guidelines, and how what our implementation plan is for that. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. Erica will join us. She's been working with the nurses to come up with a plan. So she'll be here to share that with you in a little while. Also, I was able to meet with the youth sports program coordinator, and so we were able to talk about what these new protocols are, some of the challenges that we're having, that we'll be able next week to return for Tuesdays and Thursdays to have that program start back up, but we're not going to be able to right this at this time move to allow them to use it on Saturdays. We can talk about that, in a little bit too. So both those programs will be able to start back up. Athletics tomorrow, and then next week gives us time to meet with coaches, talk to everybody, make sure we're all on the same page, and then resume. So those are my few announcements before we get started in the meeting. I thought perhaps there might be a person or two out there that didn't get the email. Let them know the status of those items.
Perfect. Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is a budget committee report from Gary Swanson. Gary, I know the public hearing for the budget was held last week. So
Yeah, the budget committee has wrapped up majority of its work. For those who don't know, the budget committee can either recommend or not recommend the budget and the warrant articles, and this year they have unanimously voted to recommend all warrant articles, including the budget.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Gary. Thank you for your work. I know the budget meetings are strenuous in the fall, preparing up for that, so thank you for all those. And thank you to the budget committee for the unanimous support. Thank you very much. The next thing on the agenda is a presentation, and we're going to have it on the computer. It's a fiscal year 21 audit presentation by Kyle Gingras of Plodzik and Sanderson. Kyle, there you are. Hello, welcome.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. My name is Kyle Gingras. I am the manager in charge of the Newmarket School District audit.
Kyle, can you, our sound is bad. Hold on just 1 second. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
Thank you, Heather. Kyle, let's try it again.
Okay. My name is Kyle Gingras. I'm the
Perfect.
manager of the
Go ahead, Kyle.
I'm the manager in charge of the Newmarket School District audit. So I will be going through the financial audit report, highlighting some key areas. And just to get started, I'd like to start by thanking the finance office for all of their hard work. The audit doesn't get done without them. When we got there to do the field work in August, they were tied out. Everything was reconciled. It was very easy to get through. So I'd just like to start off by commending them for doing a fantastic job of preparing for the audit. So you have a good finance office that prepared everything well for the audit.
Thank you, Kyle.
So I will see if I can share my screen with you. All right, can everybody see the financial statement report?
We can.
Okay, great. So where I'm going to start is with the independent auditors report. So this is really the crux of the audit. This is the opinion that we're issuing on the financial statements. So this is primarily what we come in to do, is issue this report. So the first part talks about management's responsibility. Then we have the auditor's responsibility. And then down here we have the opinions. So in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the governmental activities, each major fund and aggregate remaining fund. So that's really what you want in a financial statement audit. There were no adverse or modified opinions. You had what we refer to as a clean opinion or unmodified. So that's what you want. The rest of the letter just outlines additional information in the financials. Management discussion analysis, we'll touch on that. Additional schedules for pension liability and OPEB liabilities, as well as notes related to those. In addition, attached to the audit report is information related to a single audit. So this year, particularly with all the COVID funding that was received, the school district expended over $750,000 of federal money. Anytime that you spend more than $750,000 in a fiscal year, you're subject to a single audit, which is a compliance audit of federal funding. So those additional schedules are included in the financial statements as well. And then there are a few additional combining and non-major fund schedules attached as well, which just provide additional information to the financial statement users. So next item that we have here is a transmittal letter. This is prepared by management, so the business administrator puts this together. This provides information on the background of the school district, information on enrollment, construction projects that were completed. This next area, the impact of COVID-19. So if you want to know how, in more detail, how this affected the school district, this would be a good place to turn to. And then additional financial information of the district. And then continuing on, the next section is management's discussion and analysis. So again, this is a good place to turn to get insight from management, your business administrator, as to what is behind the numbers, why things were what they are. So whereas the financial statements themselves are more informational, this gives a little bit more background and context as to why the numbers are what they are. So this is a good resource. The management discussion analysis also provides a year-to-year comparison. So if you want to know changes in, for example, this is assets and liabilities, you can see how your assets and liabilities compared from one year to the next, which you wouldn't see in the basic financial statements. Okay, so next place we're going to go to, we're going to start with the governmental activities. So these financial statements provide the most broad overview of the school district. This includes information such as capital assets, deferred inflows and outflows of resources, and long-term liabilities. So long-term debt, pension liabilities, OPEB liabilities that are more long-term in nature that you wouldn't find in fund financial statements. Governmental activities are more representative of what you might see in a commercial entity compared to the fund financial statements. Just one thing that I'll note on these financials here, although it does show a deficit net position at the end of the year, we'll touch on a little bit later in note 9, the long-term liabilities. There's a almost $20 million liability for the New Hampshire retirement system pension liability, which is something which is not within the district's control. As a member of New Hampshire retirement system, you're required to report your share of the retirement system's liability. Same with an OPEB component of New Hampshire retirement system, which is around $4 million. So those two liabilities combined really drag down your total net position. So I would say this is no reason to be concerned showing a negative net position here, just due to those large liabilities which the district is required to report. So Exhibit A is the balance sheet for the governmental activities. Exhibit B shows the revenues and expenditures. So we report the expenses. Then there are program revenues. These are revenues that are specifically dedicated to offset expenditures within each function. And then down below we have general revenues. General revenues can be used for any purpose. They include like the school district assessment, the town's payment of taxes. That they can be used for any purpose in offsetting expenses. Okay, the next set of financial statements on C1, Exhibit C1, are the governmental funds. So Newmarket reports three major funds. There's a general fund, which is your main operating fund, a food service fund, and a federal projects fund, which is primarily federal grants. And then all of the other funds the school district has are considered non-major. They're combined in this other governmental funds column. A couple things to point out. The general fund is reported under GASB 54, so that's the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. They basically write the rules for governmental accounting. Their pronouncement number 54 has rules on how we report what gets included in the general fund. So included in the general fund are the district's expendable trust funds, and they're reported as committed fund balance. And then also what most people are interested in is the unassigned fund balance at the end of the year. So the unassigned fund balance in the general fund, $1,992,833. That does include a component that is retained by the school district at the end of the year. So we'll touch on that a little bit later when we see the breakdown of fund balance. So Exhibit C1 is the balance sheet for the fund financial statements. Oh, one other thing I'll point out on the fund financial statements, these don't report long-term assets or liabilities. So you'll notice in the assets, there's no capital assets. In the liabilities, there's no long-term liabilities for debt, pension, OPEB, any of that. So those are the primary differences between what you see in the funds compared to the governmental activities. And those differences are shown on Exhibit C2. So this takes the total fund balances on C1. These are the reconciling items, the long-term assets and liabilities, and it reconciles it to the net position of the governmental activities. C3 is our revenues and expenditures for governmental funds. The main things that I'm just going to point out here are the federal revenues. So you'll see in the food service program, nearly all of the revenue was federal. That relates to all of the meal claim, all of the meals being served being eligible for meal reimbursement during the year, which is not common. Most times you charge fees for meals, but this year due to COVID, you got reimbursed for all of that. And then you'll note in the federal projects, you had over $1 million of federal revenue, so that's largely what triggered the single audit component. And Exhibit C4 reconciles the change in fund balances, or the net income or net loss of the governmental funds compared to the net income or loss on the governmental activities. Next schedules that we have are budgetary schedules. So we have budget to actual for the general fund. And towards the end of the report, we have a more detailed breakdown of revenues and expenditures for the general fund. So I'm going to skip on this real quickly. Food service fund, budget to actual, and a grants fund, budget to actual. What I'll just note quickly on the grants fund, original budget, this is what was reported to the Department of Revenue Administration for budget. The final budget is adjusted to what the expenditures actually were, and that relates to the board having the authority to accept and expend grants that are awarded to the district during the year, which basically means that because you can accept the grants, you're not going to over expend the budget if you receive more than anticipated. So we adjust the budget for that. Are there any questions at this point?
I don't see any, so I think,
Nope.
anyone have any?
Okay.
Nope, I think we can proceed.
All right, I'm just going to continue. So real quickly, note one just summarizes the district's significant accounting policies. I'm going to go to page 29. So this is the net position and fund balance note 1.0. So the last paragraph here, the district has passed a warrant article in prior years which allows the board to retain up to 2.5% of the net district assessment in any given year. So for FY21, the district did vote to retain the maximum amount, which was $454,632. So of the total unassigned fund balance, $454,632 was retained for emergency expenditures. The difference of about $1.5 million is what goes back to reduce the tax rate for the school district. And just for informational purposes, I believe the state did revise the RSA in the last year or two to increase it to 5%. However, the district would have to amend their warrant article to increase it from 2.5% to 5%.
We have one coming up in March, Kyle, to do that.
Yep. Okay, so just as I mentioned on the governmental activities, part of the reason that the district is showing a deficit net position is the pension related liability. So you'll see here, 19,789,838 is a liability the district reports because of its participation in New Hampshire retirement system. There's also a little over 4 million, which includes New Hampshire retirement system OPEB and a local OPEB component. Those aren't the same as long-term debt where you have to make annual payments. These are just because the New Hampshire retirement system is underfunded. If they were to make all of their future payments that have been earned as of today, they'd be in a deficit. So that deficit gets allocated to all the participants within New Hampshire retirement system. But this isn't a current liability or anything that gets paid on any regular schedule. It gets updated every year by New Hampshire retirement system, so liability could go up or down. In this past fiscal year, it went up over $6 million, so that took a huge chunk out of your net position. Okay, so note 13, this is a more detailed breakdown of what makes up your net position. So there's net investment in capital assets. So this is the value of your assets less the related debt. Restricted net position, and then everything that remains is unrestricted. And then moving to fund balances. So I'll focus primarily on the general fund here. So the general fund included in the committed is $1,032,468 for the expendable trust funds. As I mentioned under GASB 54, they get combined in the general fund. Voted appropriation, so these are warrant articles funded out of the use of June 30 fund balance. Encumbrances, these are for ongoing projects budgeted for in FY21, but the expenditures didn't occur during the year. There are some student activity funds that are combined in the general fund, so these are primarily district-related student activity funds, which might include like a library or an athletic account that are funded through district appropriations. And then unassigned fund balance. So as we saw earlier, $454,682 is being retained by the district. That's the 2.5%. So the remaining unassigned fund balance, $1,538,200, that is what goes back to the taxpayers to reduce the tax rate. We're going to skip ahead a bit further. So included are at the end of the report are supplementary schedules for the general fund. First is Schedule 1, and this is a more detailed breakdown budget to actual for the general fund. So if you want to see where you ended up budget to actual on revenues during the year, this would be a good place to look. So a couple things I'll point out on the miscellaneous revenue. The district had a positive revenue over the budget of $133,861. During the year, the district received a credit or a holiday on their health insurance from the school care of about $200,000. So that is a large reason why the miscellaneous revenue exceeded what was budgeted. And then on the transfers in, this is an unusual one. This relates to warrant articles 5 through 7 from the March 2020 meeting, which are transfers to the trust funds that come from the capital project fund. However, since the warrant article was worded to come from fund balance, however, the use of fund balance is only reported in the general fund. So in order to make the accounting work, they need to be transferred to the general fund in order to go over to the capital projects. And I believe $415,000 actually came to the general fund to offset certain expenditures, which was not reflected in the budget for revenues. It was reflected in the use of fund balance. So that's why this number looks a little unusual here. So in total, the district had $916,258 revenue more than what it had anticipated during the year. Schedule 2 is budget to actual for expenditures. So at the beginning, we include encumbrances from the prior year. So these are amounts that were carried forward from the previous fiscal year that increase your budget, appropriations, expenditures, and then encumbered to subsequent year. This is the current year budget that gets carried into the following year for certain projects that weren't completed. So there was a large encumbrance on operations and maintenance, which included items like lighting upgrades and renovations that weren't completed as of the end of the year. So that budget is being carried forward into the subsequent year when it will be spent. Ultimately, budget to actual for the expenditures, you were under budget by $1,322,702. And then here on Schedule 3, we have changes in unassigned fund balance. So we have our unassigned fund balance at the beginning of the year, less what was returned to reduce the tax rate, less what was appropriated for in warrant articles, the revenue surplus from Schedule 1, the unspent budget from Schedule 2, changes in committed and assigned fund balance, and that brings you down to your total ending unassigned fund balance. As we saw earlier, this includes both the 2.5% retained as well as what gets returned to reduce the tax rate. Okay, and the last items that we have just pertain to the single audit. As I mentioned earlier, because the district spent more than $750,000 in federal money, they needed an additional compliance audit, which is more testing of compliance requirements than a financial statement audit gets into. And just as far as our opinion, we state the school district complied in all material respects with the types of compliance requirements referred to above that could have a direct and material effect on its major federal programs for the year ended June 30, 2021. So again, this is the opinion that you want. There were no issues identified in the single audit. And this is a summary of our results. So no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies. These are the major programs that were tested. And this is a detailed breakdown of the federal programs that were subject to the single audit. So that really concludes my presentation. Are there any additional questions that anyone has?
Any questions, anyone? Kyle, as always, this is one of the nights where I feel like I know the absolute least, but I learn the most, so thank you for sharing it with us again. Thank you for your confidence of the business office. We concur with those. And I think that is it for tonight.
All right, well, thank you very much for your time. And again, I would just like to commend the finance office for doing a great job preparing for the audit.
Thank you, Kyle. All right, one amendment to the agenda with the board's permission. Susan spoke a minute ago about Erica coming in and Jody coming in to talk about the protocols. And I'm wondering if we can skip to Jana right now since we're in a finance frame of mind and then double back to that. So Jana, if you could do your presentation. You know, before you begin, as always, I would just like to commend your department for the way they do their jobs on a daily basis. Coming in to sign the manifest is a very pleasant experience, and everyone is working hard, and we appreciate it very much.
Well, thank you for the kind words. As I say often up here, I throw a lot of those kudos right back at the team that I work with. I have a great group of people that work incredibly hard, really put a lot of effort into making sure that we do things correctly and right, and I couldn't be more proud of them. So they're a good group.
It was great to see their pride in the audit as well,
Yeah.
knowing that they had a part in it, so I
Yeah.
appreciate that too.
Yeah, Ms. Shelton happened to be there the day that the audits came, the paper audits, and we were all doing the happy dance. So probably the only people in the district that get excited about going through what you just went through. But so thank you for that. So next up, I know you have a lot to cover tonight. Quarter two financials in some ways tend to be a little anticlimactic because we still have half the year in front of us. I tried to make sure that I presented it in the same way we have in the past, but just to kind of give you an overview, we talk about expenditures. It's important to remember that we still are halfway through the year, so the number that you see at the end that shows as a remaining balance, we do still have some expenditures left that are just not encumbered or reflected because we can't do so. An example might be, our spring coaches. While we've hired them, we haven't yet been able to encumber their salaries as of December 31st. So that money shows as available. It's not really going to be available. We will expend it. There are also certain supplies that we order on a regular basis that tie to our curriculum, and we don't generally purchase those until we get ready for that particular part of the curriculum or those particular projects and classes and things. So we do have a ways to go. Some salaries are going to be remaining this year, as you can read from my report. I mean, there are certain activities we weren't able to run. You've heard time and time again of our hiring struggles. We have many vacancies, and of course, if a position's vacant, we don't encumber funds for it. But so we will have, we anticipate that in some areas we will have remaining funds over what we budgeted. In other areas, such as in utilities, we have already anticipated that we are going to come in at a deficit in those areas. So it's some of it's due to COVID, some of it's due to market, some of it's due to labor. And I kind of outlined some of those bigger pieces here about how you get to where you get to. So COVID-19, of course, has played a role in many different things, but in some ways it's also given us some additional resources that we didn't anticipate or budget for. On the revenue side, Kyle alluded to it when he spoke. In fiscal year 21, we operated under a food service audit, meaning that all students in the district were able to receive meals through our food program, and we were reimbursed at the federal rate for every meal to every student, regardless of whether they were free or reduced or what their status was. That waiver remains in effect in this current school year. So you're going to see two things as we go through the year. Typically, we collect revenue at the time we sell lunches, but if we're not selling those lunches, the revenues go way down. But you're going to see a corresponding increase on the federal revenues because we're getting way more than we normally would because all lunches are being reimbursed. So you'll see some variances in the food service area there. State revenues, we've talked about the state adequacy aid. We held the hearing, we took that additional money in, so you're going to see increases in our state revenues due in part to that. We have transferred that money to the capital reserve as was voted to take care of some projects that we had we discussed relative to improvements. And then federal revenues again, I gave you kind of an overview of down below of some of the funding that's coming our way. ESSER 2 we've had 3 ESSER grants. The first one we have expended. We're now working on ESSER 2. The amount of that allocation is $659,000 approximately. So that's a big amount. And then we still have an ESSER 3 allocation amount that extends one more year that's coming in around $1.5 million So we have plans for utilizing those funds, but we do have until 2024 to expend that second tranche of money. So we're trying to queue up the programming that we might need to help our students and our staff during this COVID time. A lot of it's aimed at recovery from COVID or providing supports to people in light of COVID. And so we're queuing up some pretty exciting programming and bringing in some positions that will really help families and students in the district with that money. That's the aim. And then another bright spot is the FEMA. If you remember, we were carved out as schools with the initial batch of FEMA funding because the government didn't define us as essential businesses. But they had a change of heart and retroactively allowed us to become essential businesses. So my team and I had all of those expenditures ready to go, and then we were told we couldn't submit. So the minute they opened it up again, we submitted everything again. And they've extended it too. So we're going to have some more claims that we can put in and get reimbursement for. It's at 100% of what our costs were. So a lot of our custodial services that we brought in to help sanitize and protect our buildings, we're able to submit a lot of those expenditures. Masks, PPE, various cleaning things, all of those things are getting submitted to FEMA. We're tracking them. We're trying to submit them quarterly. So as of this date, we've received about $154,000 in FEMA money alone, which was not expected at all, which is great news for us. And I anticipate that we probably will have not quite that much left to go, but I would say we're going to have more than $100,000 that we'll be submitting before the project runs out. So that's really good news for the community. Other federal awards, we received 2 other COVID-related smaller awards, but we're grateful for anything that we get. We got roughly a $10,000 award that we could use towards our school food service account, and we have earmarked that to buy some equipment for the kitchen that we didn't have in our budget, but we feel will help us with revenue and providing high-quality foods to students. And then we also received roughly a $9,000 grant on the special ed side for compensatory education. That money came in for expenditures that we had already expended. So that money will just come in. It will stay in our revenues. It will ultimately become part of our unrestricted fund balance that gets returned to offset taxes because we can't spend the same money twice. So. And then as you look kind of through the financial statements, the first one shows you expenditures by category. Again, showing that as of 12/31, the calculation shows about $1.5 million remaining in our budget that hasn't yet been encumbered or expended. But again, as I said, we do anticipate that amount will go down as we expend as we get to our cost to complete the year. And then beneath that, I have some notes of things that had a significant variance, and if anyone wondered why things might be look the way they do, like for example, our professional salaries at this point are a negative variance, meaning that we've overspent it, but that is because we have brought on board 4 long-term substitutes to help us cover absences for staff that really weren't in our budget. So, those are kind of the reasons why the financials look the same. So if I'll pause there after the expenditures because that's usually where we spend a lot of our thought. If anyone has any questions at this point before I move forward.
I don't think so, Jenna.
Okay, great. I put in a little snippet on the food service account for this time. In September, there wasn't a whole lot to report because we hadn't even submitted for our revenues at that point, but the program had just begun for the year. But you can kind of see where we're at right now. The program is anticipated at this point in the year. We're anticipating that we will overspend our budget. But again, a lot of that cost is due to the fact that we've brought on a food service management company to offset our staffing difficulties in the program. And going forward into the next budget year, we have kind of flipped our model, and we've budgeted appropriately to account for those, what feels a little bit like a shift that we may need to make to address student needs and continue to serve high-quality meals in a environment where labor is difficult to come by. And then after that, just a brief bit on the revenues. We've touched on them a little bit. Kind of showing you where we are in the year. We still anticipate that we have about $8 million of revenue that is due to us. Some of that is because of scheduled appropriations that come from the town at different, each month. So we haven't received some of that revenue, but that's kind of where we are at this point in the year. And that is what I have on the revenues. Does anyone, we kind of touched on that first, so I won't go through the details of where some of those buckets are, but does anyone have any questions for me on the statements?
Just a clarifying question. The number that we're looking at in terms of a variance for revenue is just money that's not collected yet. It's not
Correct.
Money that we won't receive?
Correct. It, like, for example, when we do our net assessment for the town, it runs in the neighborhood between $16 and $18 million a year, but we don't obviously ask the town to give us all that up front because they haven't collected the tax revenue. So we give them a schedule. We work with them to make sure that schedule is palatable to both parties, and they pay us kind of like you would pay a car payment or mortgage. They pay us throughout the year over time. So at this point, we just haven't received the second half of the year's payment, but yes, it will. We anticipate that will come.
If we had received all, would we be in a favorable position, or do you anticipate that we would be short revenue from what we had anticipated?
At this point, I do predict that we're going, as you saw in that last audit, we received additional revenues. The ESSER monies that I spoke to you about, we have an allocation, but they won't be reflected in the financial statements until we expend them. That's the way a grant works. So I do anticipate that between the FEMA monies that we're bringing in that we were not expecting, and that expending those ESSER funds throughout the year on various different things, I do think that towards the end of the year we're going to see a similar phenomenon that we did last year with receiving more revenues than we budgeted for. Because if you remember, we budget about a year out in advance, and some of these items, when we budget, were not known. The amounts weren't known. So we do the best we can, but it's quite a ways out, and certainly this has not been the easiest environment in which to predict.
Any other questions from the board? Seeing none, Jana, thank you as always for your report.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you.
Good job.
Susan will back up and go to the COVID guidelines update.
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that is, a challenge that we have faced that has caused us to have to make choices that we wouldn't otherwise ever think we'd have to consider was the impact COVID has had on our staffing, as well as our students. And just to give an example, last year, many of you know that we had built into our calendar going remote.
Susan, your mic's not on. Unmute yourself. Thank you, Heather.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
That's better.
Could anybody hear me at all before?
Probably not.
Okay. Well, there you have it. I'll start over. So one of the challenges that we've had, in addition to just labor shortage, lack of applicants, positions that remain open, for long periods of time, is that the impact it's had on our staff and students from an absentee standpoint. So not only do we have a labor shortage, then the rate of absence has been so high. I've never seen anything like it. I just haven't. To give context for that, when we were discussing last year the idea of having 2 weeks of remote after each of these breaks, because we knew that historically after breaks and during the winter months, flu season kicked in, and the absentee rate would be higher. I mean, it makes sense. Well, when we were looking at what was high absentee rates at the time, we were talking 12, maybe 13 people district-wide absent. Since the holiday break, we've had between 28 and 31 people absent every day. And when you add that to the vacancies, because we haven't been able to fill positions, it also doesn't include absences associated with things we've outsourced. So when there's absences there, the cumulative impact on our operations has been just devastating, really. So I want to take a moment before calling Erica up to talk about how we're going to approach handling this new change in guidance. I want to acknowledge the staff. I have to say that what we're doing here, I know maybe it's not as visible to other people, but we could not open our schools and continue on if it wasn't for the dedication of the people that are here. I see members of the staff here in the audience, and here they are tonight. I'm going to show up tomorrow, and they're going to cover and be asked to move to different assignments. The people in the district office are going to go down and cover for vacancies just so we can keep our schools open. So I just wanted to take a moment to thank them for all they're doing to keep our schools open for our kids. We care deeply about the students here, and that's demonstrated each and every day in the dedication that I see as I walk in the schools. So I just want to publicly say thank you to each and every one of the members of this staff for all they have done for the last 2.5 years on behalf of the students and families in this community. We once again were kind of all caught a little off guard when CDC made the announcement just before we returned from the holiday that they were going to change isolation and quarantine requirements. Of course, they made the announcement, but they didn't provide any guidance on exactly what that meant. Once they published that and our state Department of Health and Human Services received it, then they evaluated it, tried to make meaning of it, and then they made a recommendation to not adopt in whole, but to adapt some of what their recommendation was from CDC with modifications here in New Hampshire. Then they published those guidelines about a week and a half ago, and we have been trying to first understand what it is that are the differences both in CDC so that we can answer those questions, understand it for ourselves, as well as understand the implications for us here in our school district, because what they tell you is the what and not the how. And the how is really what is mission critical for us here on the ground that are tasked with trying to keep schools open and staff and students safe, both physically as well as emotionally. So Erica spent quite a bit of time, I as well, and many others, meeting with the nurses and reviewing the guidance, and we have come up with a plan, I think that addresses not only the new guidance, but also we've incorporated feedback that we've received from families, as well as staff, on how difficult it is to, one, access testing and get testing results in a timely fashion, and get appointments with medical providers. So with all of that in mind, and this new guidance, we're going to be adding some health service programming, and Erica will talk about that. But first, I'm going to have her review with you the guidance and translate that into something we hope is meaningful to you. And so I'm going to turn the mic over to Erica so that she can begin to help you process this.
Good evening. I believe the board members have been provided with kind of our quick reference sheet that we'd be using. We'd be putting this up on our website once we update all of our documents there. This one sheet gives us kind of that quick snapshot of where we're at. Everyone see? Okay, perfect. At the top, just for ease, under number 1, those are those symptoms that are unexplained or new. Those really don't change, right? Our symptoms are still the same. If we have that fever over 100, the sore throat, the fatigue, all of those remain the same. So this section is really no different than what we're doing currently. And then under number 2, when to return to school. If you look on the left-hand side, you'll see after testing negative for COVID-19. So you're ill, you're sick, but you don't have COVID. So you would return to school if you did get a COVID test that was negative, once you're 24 hours fever-free, and when your symptoms are improving and you're well enough to come to school. If you leave school or you're out and you do not get a COVID test, but you're exhibiting those symptoms, again, you would end up staying out for your 10 days, and you would return after the 24 hours of fever-free and symptoms improving. Again, right here, nothing's changed yet, right? Then we get over to the right-hand side of this purple box in the middle. So you've become ill, and you are now tested positive for COVID. After 5 days from symptom onset, if you are 24 hours fever-free and your symptoms are improving, you may return to school as long as you're also having a negative rapid test. And you have to wear a well-fitting mask for the remaining of the 10 days. Right there, that's really nothing different, right? We're all supposed to be wearing well-fitting masks. But what's important with that, and part of what we want to really do, is push out a little more education, because people are still able to spread the virus at that point through day 8. So we really have to be careful. We don't want people coming into the school if they're still going to be spreading the virus. So we have to be very careful about making sure we're washing our hands, we're wearing our masks appropriately, and we're following all of our mitigation strategies. If on day 5 you don't meet those 4 criteria, so the 4 criteria are reliable mask wearing, 24 hours fever-free, symptoms improving, and your rapid tests are negative. So if those 4 conditions are met, you return to school. If those 4 conditions are not met, you would stay out for your 10 days. Down at the bottom under number 3, this is if you're exposed to COVID-19. So currently, if you're exposed, but you are not a close household contact, which means you're not sleeping in the same room, you're not using the same bathroom, if you're just exposed in a community setting, we ask you to please watch all of your symptoms, right? And if you are a household contact, currently you would be staying out for 20 days. Under the new guidance, those would reduce to the 5 and 5. So if you are just a non-household contact, please still monitor your symptoms. If you are a household contact, after 5 days, we still ask that you get a test, so you're making sure, but after the 5 days, you are out of quarantine. If you are a household contact and you are unable to isolate from a person, so here's a good example. I have a kindergarten age student. I'm mom and I have COVID. I cannot isolate from my kindergarten age student. I need to care for them, correct? So I have my 5 days, and then they have their next 5 days. But if you are a household contact and you are able to separate, so say maybe you're a high school age student and you are fine staying in your own room, you've got your own bathroom, then you're out for your 5 days and then can return. That is the really boiled down version of the new guidance. And I'm sure there is going to be questions and situations that are going to be things that we're going to have to talk through with our nursing staff. So you might say, well, I'm a household contact. I didn't realize for 2 days I had to isolate. Okay, then they're going to talk you through. Okay, so once you're isolating, then it's 5 days. So there's going to be those situations, but I just gave you the real boiled down version.
Erica, one question that I have about
Yes.
the whole household contact thing, if someone in the household has COVID, should it be reported to the school?
Yes, because there is quarantine pieces there that we have to follow. And we can also help you kind of walk through, like, how can you isolate and what is safe
Right.
versus what's not. Like I said, if I'm a mom of a kindergarten age student, I'm probably not going to be able to isolate. And people have been great about saying, that's just not realistic for me in my situation. And we really appreciate when people just have those candid conversations. They reach out to the nurses, and they're just, walking through the situations and working with us.
So those conditions all have to be true.
Right.
It's not just 5 days. Even if it's a quarantine situation, if you were able to return, in other words, you get your COVID test, you're A-OK, you'd still have to wear, with fidelity, a well-fitted mask in all public settings. So, it's not simply one way. As Erica said, there's all of these scenarios. There's vaccinated, there's unvaccinated, and they've changed their definition of vaccinated to mean, and they're using the term now, fully vaccinated, and that means that you have had your primary series of vaccinations, and then if you are eligible for a booster, that you've had your booster. If you're eligible for a booster and you haven't had your booster, you're not considered vaccinated under the new guidelines. So that's different for us. So that's why, it requires us to, one, track information differently than we have been, because there's this whole matrix of things that have to be taken into consideration, and every circumstance is going to be unique to that particular individual or family. So it's a lot more to contemplate every time a person is positive in the community. But it's our hope, it's always been our hope that we can have students here in school. I mean, we were one of the few that opened our schools last year, and we all remain committed to doing that. But we also have to make sure that everybody's safe and healthy and able to return and not endanger anybody as a result of their return. So Erica, do you want to talk a little bit?
Can I ask some questions about
Yeah.
this real quick? First of all, I spent some time looking at other districts.
Yeah.
This is by far the best. So I don't know who made this, but I just want to give them kudos because able to explain this a lot better than other districts. So,
Thank you.
can I ask? So where it says testing,
Yes.
if it does not say the antigen test, am I right to assume it needs to be the PCR test?
Can you show me exactly where you're looking?
Yeah,
for?
absolutely. So on number 2, so
Yeah.
after testing negative, and then for number 3 on the left side, the
Yeah.
second bullet says get tested for COVID on day 5.
So the one over on this side, it could be either or. It really depends on those situations, and that's one of those pieces, right? So I could be asymptomatic, but I was exposed. Typically, a medical provider isn't going to give you a rapid test if you have no symptoms. They would require a PCR. Or you could be showing symptoms and have a rapid. So you've really got to work through, and that's why we are requiring that we do these testing with a medical professional.
Okay.
Because there's situations where a rapid test is not going to give you an accurate response.
Okay.
So we do accept both PCR and rapid tests that are done by professionals. And as Dr. Gibbons had mentioned earlier, we did get CLIA certified, so our school nurses can also provide that testing. Of course, we have limited numbers of tests, so people can still work with their medical professionals. But that's the only reason why we're not doing the home testing yet, because there's very certain situations that you just want to make sure you're doing the right one.
Yeah.
So under this section over on the left-hand side of number 2, it could be either a PCR or a rapid test, given your situation.
Okay. And the nurse would be able to answer that question. for that.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
And then for number 1, on the asterisk in the very bottom, where it says if a student has a documented chronic condition, is that needed documentation that the nurse has on file?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. So an example of that could be somebody who has asthma, right? They might have wheezing that's normal, but somebody else, I don't have asthma, and if I started to wheeze, I would say something is different, right?
Okay.
So that's that piece of something that's new and something that's different for that individual.
Okay.
And yes, it does need to be documented.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I have to echo what Andrew said, that the formatting is fantastic. It does seem like we're deviating from the DHHS recommendations a little bit in that we're requiring testing before returning after 5 days, whereas the CDC and the DHHS does not require that. Is there a reason we're doing that?
So if I've actually pulled up that guidance, I had a feeling that might come up. So
You know me
under
too well.
the DHHS, it is recommended, and it says CDC's guidance, is recommending an antigen test on day 5 before isolation is ending.
The
And-
CDC says that, or the DHHS?
So on the DHHS guidance, and I'm going to be uploading this to the website.
Yeah,
so
it
this
says you
document
can
will be
take an
there.
antigen test on day 5
Oh, yeah, you
before
can
ending
take
isolation.
Yes.
It says you can, it doesn't
And
say.
individuals and businesses and organizations can consider it, but it's not a requirement to adopt that. In talking with other districts locally, people are going in a couple different directions. The early adopters did go with this, and so we had kind of followed suit with other districts that are requiring this, especially since we have the testing ability. We also are knowing that we're going to have about 31% of people who are still testing positive and not meeting those criteria. So if we just say, hey, day 5, we're not going to follow those 4 conditions and come on in, we're going to have the potential to have other people become infected in our schools.
So you're saying statistically 31% of people who've
After day
had
5.
symptoms
Yes.
after
Continue
day
to
5.
present. Continue to present, and up to 8 days after, even if they
Continue to present
tested
symptoms?
negative, up to 8 days into this, they would still be contagious.
Continue
And-
to present what?
Contagious, spread,
So not continue to present symptoms, but
Yeah.
continue to be contagious.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so one of the things just so people understand, we're putting in a program, I just think it's important to talk about that right now. So we have a return to school screening and testing plan that we're going to implement. And so because parents are having challenges getting testing and appointments, what we'll do is on day 5, if somebody is feeling better and they believe that they meet this criteria, they would set up an appointment with our nurse. We're going to have one nurse do the screening, and then they would come in, and we're setting up in the front of our annex building across the street. There's a way you can just come in the front door, not access the rest of the building, and we're going to have a nurse there that will conduct this review. So they'll give the test, they'll discuss the symptoms so that there's a good understanding of that. They'll take temperature, to make sure the fever is dissipated, and then they will go through a review of properly fitted mask. What does that mean? Show me your mask. Let's see if it fits properly. If it doesn't, they'll give some suggestions, offer different kinds of masks. We have a lot of masks that we've purchased, these KN95s, so that we'll be able to provide those to students and to staff members. We'll review if this is the best fit mask for them. We will review how to maintain the mask, because these are not disposable. They can be used more than one time. So we'll review that with them. So the nurse will take care of all of that. And if the nurse is like, yep, check, then the nurse will notify the administration and that individual, hey, are you okay to return? Because we'll know right then and there that the test has come back negative. So families won't have to, and staff won't have to worry about that, right? They won't have to expend any money for it. It'll be easily accessible. And we just felt that would be a great service, and make it easy and simple to identify who has met the criteria without having a different standard applied in all situations. I know that in talking with our union representative and administration and teachers and paraprofessionals, that people are nervous about having people come back with COVID, knowing what this could mean. And we have a terrible staffing shortage. People are getting sick, and we can't afford to have more people out. So for all those reasons, we felt it was a way to give everybody some peace of mind, both parents and students and staff members, that in fact it is safe. It is okay to have these folks come back and return. One of the things that we're also doing, like I said, we bought a lot of masks because masks have evolved over time. And we have all the new recommendations, and what do they mean when they say a good fit? There's guidance on that. And so we're reviewing that with students. We'll be reviewing that with staff. I'll have a town hall meeting with staff on Monday, and then Monday evening we'll have another town hall meeting for families in case they have questions about this, and we'll do our best to answer them. And so, there's a lot of parts. We're also amping up some of our other procedures that aren't policy related. We're going to go back to adding more layers of the sanitizing ion machines. Gary probably can speak to it better than I, but that's the sanitizing device that we had to be trained. Our custodial staff have to be trained to use, and so we're going to increase, our sanitizing protocols in order to try to also kind of ward off any germs that might be latently residing in places that we can't get to. So I just wanted to talk about that piece so there's not like a panic that sets in that how are we going to do this and what does this mean? And I'm going to have to, people have said we spend $50 or $100 every single time we go out. Nobody will have to worry about that.
Assuming we have the test, because we may not have them.
The tests that we have, we believe that based on, and who knows, I mean, if the numbers keep ramping up, it's really hard to tell. We know that the Biden administration said that they were making more tests available to us. We haven't seen that quite yet. I'm picking up, in fact, I'm going over to Concord tomorrow to pick up additional test kits. So far, our elementary schools only used 4 of them. Of course, as I mentioned before, we're only currently using them if someone becomes symptomatic in school, whether it's a staff or a student, so that we can tell right then and there, are they COVID positive? That doesn't mean they won't develop a positive test the next day or the day after, but we'll know when leaving whether or not they are leaving with COVID for sure. So that's all we're using. Diane used, maybe today she used another one, but she's used 4. This is as of yesterday. Jen's used, our nurse at the junior senior high school used, just over 20. So we're feeling like we can add this. This would be kind of our next priority. And so we think that, it makes sense that we should be able to have an adequate supply based on what we're hearing and what we have on hand to be able to provide this for the community. So.
That's excellent with the tests. I was really worried about having access to them.
Yeah.
If we run short, so like we received some from the state of New Hampshire, and we're getting some more from the federal government. If the district was running short, and I brought in an unopened box with a test, could the nurse use that to administer to me?
We can have that conversation if the time comes.
It's not okay.
Yeah,
okay.
But right now I think we're okay.
Awesome.
And we know that we're going to get a set supply, which we've been told is going to increase. We haven't seen it yet, but this is all the talk. Both the commissioner has said that we'd be receiving this. Is on the phone with CDC and the Secretary of Education. Cardona, who's also, indicated to us that we would be receiving more at the school level to be able to support this. So we're feeling pretty good about it. But again, everything's new, and we're trying to do as much as we can with the little that we have.
Yeah, this is really throwing a lot at our students and our families, and this is a lot to kind of take in. I know that Portsmouth is requiring it. Hampton school districts are requiring negative tests. Oyster River is requiring negative tests. Exeter is not at this time. I'm just worried about false positives. I'm very worried about the kids being out of class and the loss of learning. There's parents that are very concerned about trying to get with the nurses on day 6 and make sure that the test is negative, and what if it's positive and it's a fault, and then we've got another 5 days out of class. It's a lot to swallow all of a sudden.
It is. And in order for us to be able to do this, so there's a lot of things we're doing. We have to change in order to do it. You know, it's not just, you know, hey, 5 days, it isn't like that. We're changing, and Erica's working with the nurses now. We've created a new data system so that we can, you know, we never imagined we'd have to track all this information locally to be able to make these decisions and provide this guidance to people. It's not what school nursing and health services were supposed to be in school. So
I think one of the things that for some members of the community, people who are vaccinated and fully vaccinated, the symptoms for COVID are less severe. So it's very difficult to, 2 years into this, now all of a sudden, people are starting to get sick again with the new variants. And I know that Omicron hasn't really hit New Hampshire yet, and we're just coming into Omicron. But I was really kind of hoping after this school vacation, and we've had a few weeks and numbers are starting to dip, that, you know, maybe we could talk about it. And I don't know if this is possible, if for some reason a child tests positive on day 5, on day 6 or 7, if a home test comes negative, would we be able to, members of the community, be able to reach out back to the nurse and see if we could lessen that additional 5 days?
I think right now, because we've not done this and we have no idea what this is going to mean, if we have the capacity to do more, we'll do more. We just don't know yet. Nobody's experienced enough with all of this, and like Gary said, you know, we have to have the tests in order to do it. So, and we have to have the nursing power. So we can't implement this new protocol without additional nursing support. So we're adding nursing support. And another piece of this, because we need to have you know, consistency in all that we're doing, because it's just exponentially been added to our plate. To have a lead person in that area, to really focus their attention on keeping current on these things and monitoring what's going on, tracking down tests. I mean, right now we're just all in the middle of, you know, hey, I've got a Proctor Neowa, you know, and I've got to sit here and track down tests. It's just too much. So we're doing some adjusting internally, and then you know, it's like everything. You know, we're doing as much as we can, the best we understand it, and then if we can do more, as we always have, we will do more. If you know, but
Right.
first let's take step 1 and adjust to this, and then we can see what the lay of the land is, and if we can add more, then we'll just keep adding until we get the right
One
balance
thing
for
that,
everybody.
you know, kind of jumped out for me is I think that every parent has the right to know if their child is sitting next to someone who is COVID positive. You know, and if they're playing basketball with someone who's COVID positive, or they're in the drama club with someone who's COVID positive. So when I boiled it down for myself, I think we as parents have a responsibility to let the other students know if your child is COVID positive.
And thank you for saying that, because one of the things that you'll see other school districts are doing is they're stopping the contact tracing, and I don't feel comfortable doing that. I get invaluable data from that. I don't understand. You know, yes, what they're saying is that assume you are a close contact at all times, and therefore you don't have to know. But I wouldn't have known we had an outbreak if we didn't contact trace, because we're looking at who are the close contacts, and then if they start getting positive, and we know they were close contacts, and that's starting to suggest that there's a pattern of transmission. So we're going to continue to we're going to contact trace here. We're not going to lessen what we do under more dire circumstances than we've ever seen. And the state has backed away from providing support in that way. And I just feel it's essential that we continue to keep track of that for the very reason you're saying, so that we have, so if you get a call that says you were a close contact, that Otherwise, some school districts are just not doing that anymore, and I just can't imagine not.
Would we consider this on a trial run, or are we looking at this straight through the rest of the school year? Could we maybe talk about it for a 30-day period, or are we thinking longer term than that?
Having a testing protocol in place?
Yeah, to return to school?
I would say we'd want to do it for the rest of the year. I would think that families and staff members would want to know that they can come here and get tested. I would think we'd want to continue to do that. I would advocate for that. I think it's a public service that's much needed in our community. If we can, like I said, if we are positive we can secure more tests and things like that, then and the nurses, we figure out the systems. There's a lot of reporting that goes along with this. It's not just, come in and test and that's the end of it. I mean, there's a lot of reporting that we have to do, and like I said, once we can get a sense of really the full impact of it, which can't happen until we get in the thick of it, then we'll make modifications and recommendations to right size everything, to either expand what we're doing if we can, or if something's not working, change it.
I think I'd say that.
All to keep kids in school. This is to keep kids in school. And one of the, I know there are people sitting in this very room that, they get tested and then 7 days later they're still waiting for a test result. I mean, that's insane. And until they get the result, they can't take any action, especially if they have symptoms. And it's not just that I don't feel well. The mental anguish people have wondering if they've exposed their loved ones or friends is just really having an impact on people's mental health and well-being. So I think being able to provide people with more instant results that they know is being conducted by one person, so it's not, it's being done in a very, according to standards, that the standards are being applied to everybody in the same way. I would hope and think that would bring some comfort to people.
So
and
the nurses are
reassurance.
doing rapid tests?
Hmm?
The nurses will be doing rapid tests?
Yes.
That wasn't what the original, when you presented to us, you were going to be bringing them to core or somewhere.
No, that's if
for
we do
testing.
PCRs.
They were doing to do both.
Right.
Thank you.
We're not approved for PCR tests yet.
I see.
But if we become approved for PCRs, also, as Erica said, sometimes that is the proper test. And so we want to, that's one of the things we're hoping to expand to. And then we got this we were working on that before the holiday. Let's get this going. And then we're going to pursue if we can do the PCR test too, because if we can, then folks will get 48-hour response instead of this 5 and 7 days. And they can do it right here. They don't have to be running around trying to find appointments, trying to find, I'm going to go over here. Oh my gosh, I have to wait here in the line for 3 hours. So we're hoping that this will really help families out. Certainly staff as well. I know staff is, and so all these things compound. People can't come back until they get the results. They can't get the results. It's been frustrating.
Test negative on date, so they're out Monday through Friday. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Next Monday would be day 6.
No. Well,
Saturday,
that's
Saturday,
day
because
6.
you're not here on Saturday.
Right. So they test.
So it would,
They could
So-
test on day 5,
Yep.
but if day 5 happened on the weekend, we're not coming in on the weekend.
Right, I
Yeah,
wouldn't
so they would
expect
come in
that.
on Monday.
so
They'd s-
Monday would be day 6.
Yeah.
Just for a number. If you test negative on Monday, can you go back to school Tuesday or like that day?
It's not just testing. Symptoms improving. They're able to wear a mask. There are kids that can't wear masks consistently with fidelity. And if that's the case, then they can't return. You can't return
But for
if
the
you
kids
can't.
that can.
If the kids can, if all those things are true, they would return the next day.
All right, so they could go back on, so they would miss 6 days of school and return on day 7.
So we're saying 1st through 3rd graders probably can't return. I mean, I don't know about you, but my 3rd grader couldn't wear a mask with fidelity, I'm
Well,
sure.
one of the things, thank you for saying that, because one of the things we were doing this morning is we were doing mask fitting, right? We've got the guidelines, we've been reviewing them, we see what they mean when they say a properly fitted mask. We took the KN95s down at the elementary school. We tried on a first grader. These don't work for them. They don't. It's too big, and these start banging them in the eyeballs and stuff. So we were hoping maybe for the upper grades it would work. And if your head is big enough, it will. But, you know, they still have underdeveloped, smaller heads. They won't. So what they can do, there's several different ways that you can get a properly fitted mask. That's why they have the consultation with the nurse. So we have different types of masks and different kinds of ways that you can make them fit properly. And then making sure that the kid knows how to do that and is able to. We're also training staff members and our nurses, so it's not a matter of if they're learning something and the mask gets twisted accidentally or something, that we're going to send them home, you know? Not like that. We're not like that. The idea, though, is that it has to be properly fitted. And, you know, and they say all masks have to have the clip on them. You know, some of the cloth masks that people are wearing do not have the clip on them. So that's why we have to make sure, and we're going to go over this with staff and students as well, even on a regular basis, because you can't have, you know, you have to have the same standard. Because there's two parts to it, right? The person who's infected, you know, it's not just about protecting yourself, it's protecting other people. I wear a mask not because I'm sick, but because it gives me one more level of protection if, in case somebody else around me happens to be asymptomatic and carrying. So it's an and both, and so we're doing, you know, we're ramping up and revisiting this, because this idea of properly fitted mask is not something that they've talked about before. And it has to be properly fitted if people are contagious up to 8 days potentially, and they're, you know, could be in the building. So, never mind people that are asymptomatic. The numbers in Newmarket are incredibly high. So, anyways, these are all pieces. You know, Dr. Chan told us yesterday that Omicron is not going to peak in New Hampshire until probably the 10th to the 15th of February. So, you know, we've got to ramp up our efforts here, because we can't function anymore with absences, and it's not good for kids either. We want the kids back in here. It's impossible to teach and have continuity of learning if your kids are out for 10 days. I mean, who'd ever thought these numbers would be what they are? So we're hoping that by you know, recalibrating and adding some of these protocols, going back to, you know, yet another layer of sanitation. For example, in the gyms, before and after each instance, you know, our custodial staff will go in and sanitize, because multiple groups are using those, not just the little spray. And, you know, I'm talking about the robust sanitization that occurs in the classrooms nightly. So it's you know.
And not every district's doing that either.
No, they're not. But, you know, I know the level of anxiety people feel. And it's not all. I understand it's not all. But I do know we have families right now that aren't bringing their kids here because they're concerned. And what we want to do is to provide reassurance to all families that your kids are safe here. You know, we had no transmission within our walls last year. We're going to ramp up protocols until we get to the point where we achieve that. Now, we didn't have 136 active cases in Newmarket ever, you know, and we do now. So if there's any time to be diligent, and it's not just it's diligent at home, you know. I can only, you know, I can't express enough how important it is that we all need to come together and, you know, revisit
Just for the sake
what
of time,
we're doing.
I think I'd say to the board, I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again, at some point we are going to need to decide that the onus is on people to get vaccinated, and the onus is on people to follow the protocols that the CDC, the DHHS recommends, and not on us to enforce it. And for me, I'm getting to the point where, you know, we're kind of at that. I think everyone has the ability to vaccinate, almost everyone. There's some very young children who can't, and some compromise people who probably can't, but I mean, at this point, we're asking our staff to do too much. We're limiting our staff for coming back because of testing and not following requirements have been out for almost 2 weeks, a week and a half. I think at some point we need to come to the realization we're just going to have to live with COVID the way it's being presented to us. And
I mean, I think each of us, at least I can attest for myself, I mean, this is the stuff we think about. We're not just sitting here, this is heavy stuff. And this is the stuff that keeps each of us up at 2 o'clock in the morning. And I know it keeps your entire administration. Erica, you're amazing. I mean, thank you.
Thank you.
This is very hard, and I know you wouldn't come to us and say, this is what I want to do, and this is what is going to keep us all safe if you didn't really mean it, and your team didn't really mean it, and you had exhausted all options. It's very hard. It's very hard.
I mean, Gary, to your point, I guess I personally am not prepared to make that decision because I don't think that we are in the country or the state or the town at that point yet. My greatest fear every day is that some child, our fault or not, in the town of Newmarket is going to get sick, or or a staff member or an administrator, they're going to get severely ill. And that's, as Heather said, sincerely keeps me up all the time, because when I think about the ripple effects emotionally that would have on the community, the students, everybody, that, is this ideal? No. Do I want to have these things? No. But given the fact that Omicron is just starting to get here, we're in a weird phase of what symptoms are and what they look like. People aren't getting vaccinated at the rate that I would like them to see, and I don't think they're going to. I think we have to, in my view, put things in place to protect the collective.
But there's going to be a point where people who aren't going to get vaccinated are not going to get vaccinated, and we can't be responsible for them, unfortunately. I still think we should wear masks. I still think we should sanitize our hands. I still think we should assume we have it all the time when we go out. But there's going to be a point where... And I just feel that, for me, I am not there yet. And I'm not sure what it'll look like when I am. But I don't feel that I'm there right now. Because, again, as Heather said, I don't think that any of these recommendations come in a cavalier manner from anyone, because it adds already to the hardworking staff that we've done. The nurse was here last time talking about what she was doing then. Now we have to go back to school and do 3 more cases. Exactly. Which is why I'm at the point where we need to... So, but then I think that going with Susan's point, when the call comes to say that your kid is in close contact, is it a great feeling? No. But it's important to know so that I, as a parent, can be cognizant of any symptoms that my kid might have, not just for us, but again, for the community at large. And that's sort of where I am. I've said it to probably everyone sitting here in some form or fashion recently. I hate COVID. I am sick of COVID making us have to make decisions that I don't want to make. But we have to deal with it as grown-ups. And that's sort of my feeling about it.
I think it's also important, in addition to students and the impacts on families, that not addressing this. If we were to stop contact tracing, the staff wouldn't know. I'll ask my staff who's sitting in the audience, how does that make you feel?
Well,
not
I
knowing.
don't think anyone's suggesting that we stop contact tracing. That we can contact trace at the rather than doing it at the, we do it at the, I can't speak clearly right now. We could do it at the level of, hey, you were at a lunch table, or you were in a classroom with somebody, or you're playing basketball, or whatever. But at some point, I think we need to dial back on what we're asking the staff to do as far as, now we have to hire another person. I mean, people who are going to test and don't follow the procedures are going to do it regardless. The people who aren't going to do it are going to do it regardless of what we have for policies. So let's recommend the DHHS policies as written. I don't think we need to personally require tests after 5 days to come back if they're symptom-free.
But didn't Erica say, if I heard you correctly, Erica, that it was the organization's decision to do the 5-day testing?
She did, and she said 31% could still be transmitting COVID, and we don't know how masks affect that, so it may bring it down to a negligible level. We don't know. I assume we don't know.
Well, we would be introducing to a staff that's brittle right now, the possibility of 30% of the people that are not in the building transmitting would now be in the building. And that is, I'm just telling you, it's not possible to run the school if 30% more of the staff that are already out are now going to be out or potentially get sick. I don't know what the expectation would be. I mean, we aren't going to be able to educate your children. We're struggling to do it now. I can't always put a qualified educator in front of every student right now. And so this will help us. And I appreciate the frustration because I promise you that we are all at a point where it's hard to imagine that we would be sitting here today under these circumstances. And I understand the frustration. The needle for vaccinations in our town hasn't changed in quite some time. And some of it could be that the data is not updated, and so we're not getting accurate information from the state. So maybe it is getting better, and I don't know. But those that are unvaccinated are the ones that are more impacted, and they're impacting others that are vaccinated now. And you know, we have to do whatever we can to preserve everybody and support everybody at this time. And I agree, at some particular point, I hope something changes. But right now, it's worse than it's ever been. And I can't imagine doing less.
And I would just like to add, too, that it's not just about how sick you're going to get from COVID. I mean, if I have to be out because I have a fever or I'm just sick enough and I can't go in, like that's someone that doesn't see those kids on a regular basis. It's not going to be there. And it's not just about spraying this, it's also about the safety of the kid in the building. That if we don't have people there regularly, we can't necessarily trust that those kids are going to be safe for many of the other things that could happen in a school building. And I think if there's anything we should be able to, parents should trust us that those kids are safe.
So those are the changes that we're making. There is really no change to the plan per se. It's you know, our plan states that, you know, when there's new guidance, you know, we'll take time to digest what it is and come up with a plan for implementation. That's what we've done. You know, procedurally, we've you know, feel like we're addressing some of the challenges our members of our community have shared with us are problematic for them. And we're hoping that, you know, this will help everybody get answers to their questions quickly, or quicker than they are now, and having it being done locally by people that they trust, I think is also helpful, especially when you have the smaller kids come in to not have to be exposed to 3 hours of a wait to get a test, to wonder if you have COVID or you could potentially be spreading it. It's very stressful for people. So, so that is that portion. Is there any other questions about the new guidelines and our plan to implement?
You're referring to just the screening and not the athletics, I assume?
Pardon?
Are you referring to the athletics as well? Because we haven't discussed
because we
that.
haven't done the athletic yet.
Yeah, okay.
I'm just
That's what I
saying
was
this
just clarifying. Thank you.
Jody, are you still available? And I know you had another meeting.
Thank you, Erica.
Thank you, Erica.
Wait, Jody, hold on 1 second. Yep. No, I'm fine.
Jody. Thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I know, listening to you all and Erica, I'm wishing I had gone to nursing school. I completely missed out on my on a career that is just there's just so much to it. There's so much to it. So I'm psyched to get the kids back on the courts and running in our hallways as we do, and swimming and cheering, and it's good that the kids are going to have that opportunity to get back out there tomorrow. So I'm looking forward to that too. And clearly, as you just heard too, we have to change up a little bit about how the way we were doing things prior to our shutdown 2 weeks ago. So I'm going to share the screen. I met with Dr. Givens yesterday afternoon, and Jamie Hayes also joined us as well too, just to talk through ways that we felt like we can keep our athletes safe too. So I'm going to try to share my screen, which I should know. We've been doing this for 2 years. I should definitely know how to share a screen by now. So give me just a second.
Nothing feels naturally. At this
You would
level.
think I should just know. Can everybody see this?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. So when we were talking about masks, what we had originally presented to you back in, I think we met in early November, I met with you. We had talked about masking in every place except for on the court. So at this point, as you probably, if you're watching the news or looking at the newspaper at all, you're going to see a lot of different players wearing masks even on the court. Not ideal, we understand that, but that is what we're suggesting at this point, is that everybody masks at all times, including players, spectators, and officials. So that is one of the things that we're looking for. And we want the surgical or disposable masks on the players. So obviously they're going to sweat, they're not going to be pretty. We're going to definitely be able to provide the athletes with extra masks as well. So we want something that can be thrown away immediately after a game. Spectators, we're looking for the home team athletes to be limited to household family members only. And I've developed a Google spreadsheet that I'm going to work with the athletes directly and ask them to provide me names of their household members that they think they would attend the game, so that those names would be available to us at the front door, so that we can check in our household family members. Away team spectators, we'd like to limit to 2 household members per player. So we're going to have to get a roster from our visiting teams and check off their spectators. And then we're going to also have a home and away area for families. So, and ask our families to distance in their own areas. So Gary and his wife can be in one area, and one of the other players' families would be and socially distanced sitting a little bit further away, so that we're separating by towns as well, which I think naturally has been happening. The last game that we had on your last school board meeting, when I was there, I looked around and people were sitting in family pods, and our away fans were in one area and our Newmarket fans were in another. So it seems to be naturally happening, and we're just going to continue with that as well. The other thing, and the last thing that we'd like to see, is not only with benches, but with the buses as well. And that's in our benches, as you all know, they're chairs. So Jamie Hayes and I are going to number those chairs and basically have assigned seating for our players, so that they each know, oh, I'm in chair number 1, I'm sitting in the same chair, and have an extra mask available on that chair, so that if there is some sweating between coming in and out of a game, there's clean masks available at that chair. And it also helps us with contact tracing as well. And we're going to ask the same thing for busing. For the bus seats, we're going to make sure and speak to Susan and I are meeting with the coaches, as she alluded to earlier in your meeting, that we're going to meet with the coaches tomorrow and just talk about how for contact tracing, it would just be helpful to know exactly where each seat that the athlete is sitting in. So those are the pieces of the puzzle that we think are going to really help out with any further spread within any of the teams, and probably our best effort that we can make and make sure that our staff, the coaching staff, is aware of that tomorrow as well. Does anybody have questions?
Just one other thing I'll mention is that this is just for the next 2 weeks, and then just like with the testing stuff, we'll reevaluate. For this, we just want to do 2 weeks and see how this is working out for us, and if Omicron starts to curve, which doesn't seem based on the call with Dr. Chan that it likely will in 2 weeks, but if things improve, then we can always dial them back, and if it's getting worse, maybe we try some additional things.
What metrics are we going to use to determine that?
Determine what?
Whether or not the spread's improving or getting worse based on these protocols.
By contact tracing, we can see how it's impacting within, like I did the last time.
So for the athletes, but not the families?
Pardon?
You're only referring to the athletes then, I assume?
We're referring to our people, yeah. Our coaches, our staff members. We do keep a list of that, but by keeping the spectators in their area and the families, we're not going to need to contact trace within them. What happens, can you talk a little bit about if there's an outbreak like with us, the AD, I believe, contacts the other one and lets them know because there's contact tracing on the other team that needs to take place. Is that what you're referring to? How does that work?
I was trying to understand whether the 2-week testing period, for lack of a better term, is for the spectators as well, spectator policies, or just for the athletes?
No, for these enhancements. You're
So that
asking
includes the
all these enhancements for the next 2 weeks, and then we'll reevaluate, yeah.
Will this?
And that is true though too, because there were some cases after the last home game, so I did need to reach out to the visiting town and let them know that we had some positive cases after, without identifying anybody, of course. But yeah, so it's tricky. It is tricky, but I want them playing.
Yeah. So we do let them know, and then they do their contact tracing on their side. But with everybody being maskless, anybody that was in the game during that time, the spread and spray from athletes, running and such, and sweating, is much greater than if we're just sitting in the room talking. So,
Andrew, did you have a question?
I had a couple. If we're hosting, is the visiting team going to be required to wear masks?
yes.
Okay.
So people might not.
That is true, yes, and I did confirm this with the NHIAA. I said, if I have the rule of wear masking, does our visiting team have to follow that? And the NHIAA simply said, home rules.
Okay.
So they do, and I do have to tell you, there is one team that I know is refusing to mask at all. So we're trying to find some alternatives, and they may end up calling it a no contest. So Jamie Hayes and I are trying to figure out how we're going to work with that. It can happen.
Okay, but the forfeit would be on them and not us, correct?
A no contest isn't really even a forfeit.
Okay.
It's like there was no game scheduled at all.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And then if for some reason that happened more than once, there are waivers that I can go to the NHIAA with and fill out if we don't meet the minimum number of games. I've been in a lot of contact with the president of the NHIAA. They understand our data here in town, and they're certainly taking that into account. And I know they were meeting today as well to start going through, trying to figure out if they could decrease the number of games required to be part of tournament season.
Okay. And are we too early to start worrying about the impact on playoffs then, if that's the case?
Well, I worry about that all the time. I have to think ahead like that. So that's why I asked those questions. I made sure to have that conversation with Jeff Collins at the NHIAA, and he said, we're still in a COVID year, and that's why we make waivers, Jody. I said, okay. He seemed to not be overly concerned and understood that there are going to be districts that are in the situation where they don't meet the minimum number of games required, and that's going to have to be on them to figure out how that plays out.
Okay. And if we go to, if we're visitors at a school that's not requiring their players to play masks, we could still play, correct?
We can, and
Okay.
the message that Dr. Givens and I are going to give to the coaches tomorrow is our students will be masked. It doesn't
Okay.
matter if we go to Hinsdale. Well, Hinsdale does have a masking, but if we go to a school where there isn't a mask policy, our students still will be masked.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you.
I have some
Appreciate
questions
it.
as well. How are we going to enforce masking? Well, how are we going to enforce the spectators, limiting the number of spectators to household family members and household family members for away people, as well as how are we going to enforce the players wearing masks on the court during the game? I mean, are we going to stop the game and pull kids out? I'm sure the coaches don't want to do it. I'm sure the refs don't want to do it.
Yeah, it's not fun, Gary. I'll tell you, it's
I can
just not.
imagine.
So the household members for our home team, I'm going to have each athlete or a parent. We haven't really quite figured out those logistics, but we're going to have that Google sheet available ahead of time and filled out ahead of time so that each of our players can identify who lives in their house and will be attending the games coming up. And if it has to change game to game because maybe a household's grandparents both live there, but grandpa's not feeling well 1 week, can't go, but maybe can go the following week and be added, then we're going to have to update that on a weekly basis. Our visitors, it's not going to be easy because all I can say is, and keep reminding the other athletic directors from the visiting teams, we have 7 boys home games remaining before tournament season, and we have 6 girls home games. So between Jamie and I, we are in close contact with the athletic directors, and constant reminder to the coaches and making sure they're communicating with their visiting families that if you're coming, you can only bring 2 people. And we have a lot of towns in the western part of the state that aren't allowing any away spectators. So the other thing that we're going to do is we're going to start live streaming all of our games. So I worked with our IT department today. They provided me with an iPad to use over to the end of February, and we're going to start live streaming as well. So it just gives people an opportunity to see that can't be in physical attendance. It's not going to be fun sitting at that door, and I hope that there's no conflict and people can understand. They're not easy conversations to have with people, but it won't be the first time we've had to have them either. And as far as the players on the court, that's a conversation that the coaches have to have with their players, that you have to make every attempt to keep that mask up. Of course, the kids are running, they're sweating, it's going to slip. You've got to at least make the attempt. To completely wear it down below or not at all is not going to be okay. You're going to have some slipping going on, and it's going to be up to the coaches to monitor that. And I'm there for all the boys' games coming home, and Jamie's there for the girls' games, and I don't want to take that authority away from a coach to step in, but if we needed to, then Jamie or I would step in and have that conversation with the player. And if they get pulled out because it's I think there's a big difference between somebody blatantly not trying to wear a mask while playing versus someone who it's sweating and it's slipping and it's going to happen.
Yeah, of course.
And I think too, just to remind everyone that last season we wore masks. So the protocols that we're introducing are not new to us. Many of them are things that we're reintroducing this year. We've had fewer protocols going into this season this year than last year. So last year, everybody wore masks. And so our athletes are pretty familiar, as are athletes that have played us. So I just wanted to say that. Also at home games, we will have an officer present. So if anybody gets, a little rowdy, we'll say, there will be an officer there to assist.
And can I get clarification? So the town manager issued an emergency order that we have to wear masks in all town buildings.
Yes.
I understand the school policy wants to be wearing a mask, but are we required to do it anyways because of the town manager's emergency order? I assume the school building is part of the town building?
He is the emergency director for the town, and so I would suggest that if he has that, it's my belief that it applies to everybody.
Okay, thank you.
We're still a municipal, we're owned by the
Will there
town.
be a place for, obviously they're gonna be running around, they're going to be sweating. At some point, they might have to go to a corner and just catch their breath. Are we going to have spaces for these athletes to maybe just take a minute and catch their breath? Can we do something like that? Just unmask?
You can go outside.
Okay.
Okay, so what Dr. Chan suggested when we asked these types of questions was that if somebody needs a mask break, that they go outside.
Okay.
That they step outside because, taking mask breaks within the building indoors is not recommended at this time. So that was the guidance we got when we asked that question yesterday.
And we have the 2 doors that both sides could use. In the gym.
So if athletes need to take a break, that's what they suggested for. That's what they said. So.
It's there. That's all that matters.
Yeah, and the locker rooms are open. We have a home and away locker room available, so as long as there's not another student in there, one athlete could go in, just take their mask off for a couple of minutes just to regroup, and then as long as they're alone, and then go back into the gym if they needed to as well.
Any questions from the board?
Thank you, Jody.
Thank you, Jody.
Joining us. Appreciate all your work.
Good times. Just keep smiling. That's all, right?
Yep. It's appreciated.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for all
Thanks,
you do.
Jody.
All right. Take care.
All right, we'll move into the action items of the agenda. The first thing is approval of the minutes. I seek a motion to approve the January 3rd, 2022 minutes.
Second.
We have a motion from Mr. Swanson and a second from Ms. Durant to approve those minutes. Any amendments? Hearing none, we'll move to the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
They're approved unanimously. Andrew, I think you're the winner of the manifest.
So I make a motion to approve the manifest for the week of January 21st, 2022 for the amount of $1,065,389.31.
Thank you.
We have a motion from Mr. Hemmicken, a second from Ms. McKinney. All those in favor of approving the manifest say aye.
Aye.
I seek a motion to accept the fiscal year 2021 audit report as presented this evening.
I'll make a motion.
We have a motion from Ms. Durant with a second from Mr. Swanson to approve the audit. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
It's approved. I seek a motion to accept the second quarter financial report as presented tonight by Jana.
I'll second.
We have a motion from Mr. Swanson with a second from Mr. Hemmicker. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I seek a motion to approve the COVID-19 protocol and modifications that we've discussed this evening.
Second.
We have a motion from Mr. Swanson and a second from Ms. Durant to approve those modifications. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? 4-1. It's approved. Susan, number 6, the leaves of absence.
Yes, let me find those. So we have 3 of our support staff members who have requested leaves of absence for various lengths, if I can find it. So what the support staff contract says that if they're asking for a leave of absence, that they would, submit it to me, and if I was comfortable, that I would make the recommendation to you for approval. And so I'm asking for approval of 3. Donna Chick from December 7th through the end of the year. Lynn Dulac from February 21st to February 25th. And Cheryl Rosa from May 9th to the 13th.
Make a motion, we accept the, or I should say, I move, we accept the leave of absences as recommended.
We need a second.
Second?
We have a motion for Mr. Swanson and a second for Mr. Durant to approve the leaves of absence as listed. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
They're approved. The next thing, Susan, is a grant, 2 grants from the NCEP.
Yes, we love them. So we have 2 more grants that they have been gracious enough to award. One is for Wellness Wednesdays at the Junior Senior High School. So they have some activities and materials that they would like to purchase, and NECP has awarded them $750 for that purpose. And then at the elementary school, we started a ukulele program, and they were shy, some ukuleles, and so we requested a supplemental grant to purchase some more, because they purchased the first batch for us. And so,
Awesome.
again, thank you for supporting us in these programs.
I seek a motion to accept the 2 grants from NCEP, our friends there, a $750 Wellness Wednesdays grant and $182.21 ukulele program grant for the elementary school.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion from Ms. McKinney with a second from Mr. Swanson. I will say, Susan, the Wellness Wednesdays, the one person that lives in my house that does them learned to crochet, because that was something she was allowed to do. So it's just neat to see these things happening in real life. So thank you to NCEP for allowing us to give people opportunities that they might not have in this way and every way. So we'll move to the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, it's approved. All right, that ends our regular business. Our next regular meeting is February 3rd at 5. And then the deliberative session for the town is the 5th of February, a Saturday, at 9 a.m. And then election day is March 8th, 2022, from 7 to 7 here in the Town Hall Auditorium. I seek a motion to enter non-public session under RSA 91A 3, 2A and C. Yes, Gary.
So moved.
Before we do, just to remind you for the newer members of the board, you're at that one member of the board the elections all day, so.
Okay.
We'll have a sign up.
You can rotate.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Where
Patty
is
will do it.
the deliberation?
Here.
Here, okay.
Yeah, Patty will do a sign up for
And
the
we're
election day.
second. The town goes first this time.
What?
So the town's going first this time?
At 9?
Yes.
Okay,
And after theirs, ours begins.
okay, great.
Thank you.
We alternate, so we were first the last time. Then
Gotcha.
last year, there was no live deliberation, so it's their turn to have
Okay.
their meeting first.
Second, the motion on the floor.
Yeah, we have a motion on the floor, Ms. McKinney, to enter non-public session at 7:03 p.m. And a second for Mr. Swanson. All those, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Swanson? Ms. Durant?
Aye.
Me?
Aye.
Turn my microphone.
All those in favor? And we are in non-public session at 7:03 p.m. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Yep, shut the mic.